This is HighIntensityBusiness.com with Lawrence Neal, helping you achieve your health and fitness goals. Become a great personal trainer and build your high-intensity strength training business.
This episode is brought to you by ARX, the most innovative, efficient, and effective all-in-one exercise machines I have ever seen. I was really impressed with my ARX workout. The intensity and adaptive resistance was unlike anything I've ever experienced. I love how the machine enables you to increase the negative load to fatigue target muscles more quickly, and I love how the workouts are effortlessly quantified. The software tracks maximum force output, rate of work, total amount of work done, and more in front of you on screen, allowing you to compete with your previous performance to give you and your clients real-time motivation. The ARX uses a computer-controlled motor to give you the exact amount of resistance your clients need 100% of the time. This means that the resistance can never become dangerous, is intuitive and simple to use, and can provide you with all of the results you and your clients are looking for in a fraction of the time. ARX is highly effective and efficient in delivering all of the benefits of exercise, including increased strength, muscle mass, cardiovascular conditioning, bone mineral density, and injury recovery. As well as being utilized by many high-intensity trainers to deliver highly effective and efficient workouts to their clients, ARX comes highly recommended by world-class trainers and brands, including Bulletproof, Tony Robbins, and Ben Greenfield Fitness. To find out more about ARX and get $500 off install when you place an order, please go to arxfit.com and mention HIB, that's High Intensity Business, in the How Did You Hear About Us field. So again, to get $500 off install when you place an order, head on over to arxfit.com and enter HIB in the How Did You Hear About Us field. Lawrence Neal here, and welcome back to HighIntensityBusiness.com. This is episode 257. Today's guest is Matt Hedman, who returns to the podcast for a part two. Matt is the founder and president of The Perfect Workout, a slow-motion, high-intensity strength training company with over 60 locations across the United States. Matt, welcome back to the show.
Thanks for having me back, Lawrence. It is an honor. Thank you.
You are welcome. The honor is mine. I really appreciate you coming back on. So many nerdy questions I have here to ask you. How have you been since we last spoke? What have you been up to?
Let's see. Pretty good. So I think we spoke in November, and we're speaking here, recording in January of 2020, and so it was a good holiday season, good time with the family. Last week we just had our quarterly executive team meeting, and we're all from different parts of the country, and so we all made our way to Colorado, where actually Kyle, who's been on your podcast before, is now living, and actually squeezed in a day of skiing and snowboarding in addition to our meeting days from last week as well. So that was a lot of fun.
Lovely. And you strike me as someone who is obviously very productive, very well organized. And I'm guessing, and we'll probably get into this, that you're quite good at setting boundaries. So people on the outside might think, oh, Matt must work all the hours, running that big company. But would I be right in saying, did you manage to carve out a fair amount of time for family over the holidays and sort of protect that time?
Okay. Yeah, that's a good question. So this might be, there's a number of ways I could answer that question. And, I guess I'll answer this sort of somewhat chronologically. And, so it used to be, and so when my wife and I dated and were engaged for a total of about 5.5 years before we actually got married. And she used, and this goes back, we met a little over 16 years ago. And I remember her and I, we would often, work on the business until after 10 p.m. almost every single night, working 6 days a week. And certainly every single night it was after 8 o'clock. And then over time, that improved, and especially once we started having once we had our kids, then and needing to have family time at dinner, it's kind of forced me and us to not work as much on work stuff as we had before, even though having young children is not, some people would say it's certainly work intensive as well. Mm. And so I've gotten better than actually much better as far as than I used to be, as far as not kind of sort of overworking on work stuff. Having said that, I still have room for improvement, and in fact, this last I would say over the Thanksgiving holidays here in the U.S., I think I was pretty free of work maybe fully free of work on Thanksgiving itself, and probably the day after or so. If my wife was here, she'd be able to give a more definitive answer on that. And then, but for the Christmas holidays, my wife and I had the agreement that I'd be not work at all on Christmas Eve. And Christmas, I didn't work at all on Christmas, but there was just all these little fires came up towards the end of the year where I had to do actually a fair amount of work on Christmas Eve as well. But then we were gone at our in-laws' place for several days in Tahoe right after the first of the year, and I think I was pretty much work free that time too. So I can't pretend to be sort of the perfect, hey, I just have a perfect amount of time off and life is balanced. Although I'm better than I used to be.
Fair enough. Appreciate the honest answer. And are you looking to attend REC with yourself and with your team this year at all?
Yes, that is the plan. And so, yes, that's the plan, and I'm really looking forward to it. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think you said to me on the last podcast, I think you said, we'll see you at REC. I've just remembered that. And at the time I wasn't sure because of Arthur, obviously, and trying to make it all work. And I was a bit concerned, would my fiance be okay by herself? We have a small dog, just that whole transition as a first time. As our first newborn, really don't know what to expect. But we talked it through. Ash slept on it, and I will be attending this year, which is really exciting. And it's certainly going to be a little stressful, I think, because I'm not completely comfortable leaving them to it. But Ash is a wonderful mum and doing a great job so far. And it's a while away, so I think we're going to learn a lot in that time. But yeah, as always, super excited to go to REC. Best weekend of the year, no exaggeration for me. Always love seeing the community and learning a ton. Just curious, anything you're particularly excited about? Any particular keynotes or anything like that for you? Yeah,
and so it's been a few weeks since I've looked at the website, but my memory is the last time that I looked, Stuart Phillips was going to be speaking. Is that still on the schedule?
So.
Okay.
Yeah.
So and there might be other people have been added, since then. Anyway, but when that. I'm excited about that. And is well, because he certainly seems to be one of, if not the kind of leading researcher, or as far as protein and dietary protein intake and its effect on building muscle. And I'm interested to hear what he has to say, and also if I can either ask a question after his talk, and or track him down in between talks and pick his brain a little bit more. I'm interested in that among other things. So, but that's certainly one thing which comes to mind as far as something I'm excited about.
Yeah, I'm sure you'll get a chance to do that. And then you've also got, if I can pronounce her name correctly, is it Professor Bente Clarland-Peterson, who's an expert on myokines, among other things. I'm probably not doing her justice, but she is, I believe, up there in terms of foremost experts on that subject, from what I understand. So that will be, obviously, that's a real kind of Pandora's box right now, and we're just starting to learn, about all these different myokines and how they affect the body. So that would be very interesting too.
That'll be really interesting. Yeah. And I haven't heard of her, but, prior to the last REC conference, I hadn't heard of Jeremy Oeneke, and boy, he sure provided some interesting information and was worth the price of admission just himself. So,
he caused some controversy, didn't he, last year?
Yeah, but I'll tell you what, it was, like I said, he advanced some ideas which I hadn't ever even heard proposed before. And he's a bright guy and obviously lives kind of in the world of research a lot more than I do. And so I found it, and after I saw him, then I went back and can't remember if he was on your podcast once or twice, but I listened to whatever. I listened to the podcast which he had been on and found those very useful as well. So,
great.
Yeah.
We covered some of his talk actually about the relationship between strength and muscle size and things like that. Yeah, I mean, just going back to Professor, I think it's Professor Bente Clarland-Peterson. She even though she's probably one of the top experts in her field, she does keep quite a low profile, I've noticed. If you Google her name, most of the TEDx talks and different talks she's done are in her, oh my God, I can't remember her native country now. I want to say it could be the Netherlands. somewhere close to there, but they're all in a native language anyway. And so, yeah, for that reason, you should feel bad about not knowing who she is, because she seems to keep a relatively low profile. So there you go. So super excited, but obviously excited now to talk to you about some of the things that we didn't get to talk to you about in our part one. And we did get to talk about business and productivity, but there's so much more in those two categories I really want to explore with you. So just starting off with some of the business stuff, I'm opening a studio here in Galway in Ireland within the next month or so with my close friend Sean, who you may have met last year at Rec, but he'll be coming with me again this year.
Great.
So you'll meet him then too. And I'm just, I'm sort of, we've got the lease, we've ordered the equipment, we've sort of worked out how we're going to position ourselves and strategy, and we're sort of working out piece by piece. But I was just curious, if you had to start over again, right? If the perfect workout was not around and you had to start over, what would you do differently? What are some of the key things that stand out that you think, we would definitely do that differently a second time around?
Oh man, yeah, that's a great question. I'll say the answers which come to mind when you pose that question, and if there was some additional things that you wanted to explore related to that, feel free to kind of ask ask me what you will. So if I had it, so one question would be, what is and so this is some version of a partnership between you and Sean, is that right?
Correct. Yeah.
Okay. And so what I would, one thing to help me answer your question, then if I try to put myself in your shoes, is do you guys have a, kind of a vision for what you want to, like, is this going to, be a one location place and you want to make it the best you can be, or is it trying to, scale like I did, or something else, or what's your, what's your vision?
It is. I like how this is almost turning into a coaching call. It is actually quite. Initially, I was kind of quite content with, if we got one studio doing really well and that was very profitable, and maybe a handful of others, that would be a wonderful achievement, and a very. I love the idea ever since reading Small Giants. Have you read that book? Are you familiar with that?
I have not, but it's on my list. I think Luke Carlson had recommended it at one point, and so it's on my list somewhere. Yes. Yeah,
it's a great read. And one of the things that I really like about it is this idea or examples of these businesses that are very successful, but they don't pursue growth continuously. They get to a certain size, and then it's more about becoming a real part of the community, giving back. And I like the idea, if Ash and I decide to settle in Galway long term, then I like the idea of having a business that could really be part of the community. That's really exciting for me. However, Sean has a much bigger vision, and he likes the idea of proving the concept first, obviously, and then expanding across the country and maybe through Europe over time. That would be like the long-term vision. And that's really, I guess, from his side. And I share a similar motivation. It's really wanting to make a dent in the kind of healthcare crisis we have right now. And I think we both had loved ones who we feels life could be extended or quality of life could have been improved if they had access to or more aware of resistance exercise and the benefits therein. That's kind of driving some of that. But yeah, I suppose the shared vision right now is quite grand. And we would like to, I'm not sure if we would do a perfect workout on it, but something like I described would be ideal. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So, okay, good. Okay. That gives me kind of a better context for me to kind of figure out how to answer your question. And so if I look back kind of at my own experience and kind of what I would do differently, and again, thinking kind of along those lines, because if you would have asked me, so I opened our company back in 1999, and in the beginning it was just me. I didn't even have a partner. And I think if someone would have asked me right at the beginning, I would have had, I don't know, a clear vision, but a fuzzy vision that I just wanted, that I did want to get bigger and have, multiple locations and maybe lots of locations. I didn't really put that picture together until 2002, like a full crystal clear picture, but I would have had, kind of maybe not even quite as well painted out as what you just painted to me. So, but it would have been somewhat similar. And so then if I go back and figure out what I would do differently is one thing is so it started in 1999 and it wasn't until late 2005. So it was actually, gosh, what is that? 6.5 years from May of 99 through November of 2005 before we opened our second location. So it's actually quite a bit of time with just one location. And so knowing what I know now, what would I have done differently is one of the things is I in the beginning, I did all of the training. It was literally just me. I was, president / CEO of the company, did whatever, marketing decisions that I could, the janitor, the trainer, the manager, just everything. And so what I found is the more, and you probably heard this before, but it's true, especially if you want to kind of grow and make your business better, is the more time and energy you can spend kind of working on the business, kind of making the business, improving the business itself. That just, obviously it seems obvious when you say it out loud, but it improves your business faster. It reduces the time between where you are and where you want to go. And so for the first, certainly first year, I was the only person, and then started getting some other, part-time trainers, I think in probably mid to late 2000 or so. And so started to get a little bit of time away from the training. But hindsight being 2020, what I would do would be to do whatever I could within reason to get more time and energy to work on, what Stephen Covey would call the important but not urgent things, and which is working on the business. And there was one other thing that it just came to mind. What was that? It'll probably come to me.
Yeah, don't worry.
I remember what it was. It was is to learn as much as fast as possible as good. And you're in a great position to do this, by the way, because just your job is.
I have a ridiculous advantage, don't I?
So, which is wonderful. And and I probably back then did more reading and went to more seminars and that kind of stuff than most people, than an average person. Mm-hmm. But as I look back even right now, I probably read about 25 books a year, which to me makes things like, gosh, I know people that read significantly more than that. I even was Arthur Jones used to talk about allegedly reading one book a day. And I even heard Darden at one point talk about, he did that for a brief period of time and said you can really ramp up your knowledge if you're reading a book a day. But I've heard other people talk about a book a week, and I've been, long story short, I'm a book every 2 weeks or thereabouts, and which is significantly more than I did back then. So what I'm trying to say is I really want to and aspire to read and learn more right now where I am today. And if I had to go back to 1999 and those early times, I wasn't even reading even close to as much as I am today. And I would definitely ramp that up as much as I could, because you just get, just reading a variety of different books and ideas. And of course, if we're talking about business, different business theories, and I mean, all it takes is one idea can just change your life potentially if it's the right idea, for the right time and place. And so those would be two things which pop into mind as far as to answer your question.
Yeah, no, that's a great response, and I agree completely with that approach. Especially what you said about working on the business, not in the business. That's something that has been repeated to me on the podcast. I mean, Luke's mentioned it a whole bunch of times, and some great resources on that are obviously the E-Myth Revisited. Traction talks about that. So if people are interested in, they hear you say that, like, what does he mean by that? Then I would definitely check out those books, because they elaborate on that. And it's something that I've actually struggled to do and have progressively done better at with my online business, with the podcast and the membership, is being able to step away.
Sure, right.
Just things like, for instance, the blog posts for every podcast, I do not do those. And I did them for the longest time. And when I first outsourced them, I was just so unhappy and such a perfectionist. You're not structuring the sentences as perfectly as I like. And it was quite funny because I was sort of put in my place by my friend Sean I mentioned. Said to me, actually, I think they're much more succinct now. So he was basically saying that they're actually better than when you did them. I've learned that is absolutely important, and I appreciate you reiterating it for sure. And so something we'll be bearing in mind with this business. Your second point about learning. One thing I was going to just play devil's advocate on that for a moment is I love learning. I love reading. These days we're consuming so much media, podcasts, videos. And I recently got to the point where I was like, I just need to stop. I need to stop consuming stuff. I think I consume good stuff. I mean, as obviously Tim Ferriss coined the whole cultivate selective ignorance. Your information diet is as important as your nutritional diet. And so it's good stuff, but I found that I was consuming so much contradictory stuff that it was just messing with my head and actually causing me to almost question my own judgment. So let me give you an example, right? So I'm sure you're familiar with Gary Vaynerchuk, right? You're familiar with him and his name and his stuff?
I've read one of his books and I know a little bit about him. Yes.
So he's very popular right now across social media, always telling people that they need to be on every single social media platform, posting 30 times a day, and ridiculous advice in terms of what we should be doing. And not only should we be doing that, but we should be the practitioners, the CEO, not the marketing person. Which because you have to know the pulse of those. You have to know how to use those platforms, and because you're the helm of your business, all this kind of thing. And at the other end of the spectrum, you'll read, Gary Keller, The One Thing, or Peter Drucker and Tim Ferriss talk about, being really judicious and choosing only the things that are going to have a high ROI and 80-20 analysis and all this kind of thing. And I tend to skew far closer to that end of the spectrum. I find that it makes me happier and makes me feel much more calm. But yeah, anyway, so that's a long way of me saying, do you ever have that issue where you're like, I probably read a similar number of books to you. I imagine one every 2 weeks, maybe one a month is more accurate for me. But then I'm consuming all this other media, so I don't know if that makes up for it. But do you ever feel like you're just so overwhelmed by information that actually harms your ability to have a clear mind and be productive?
That's a great question. So for me, the short answer to your question is I don't feel that way. I in general, and I mean maybe there are times, but just off the top of my head, I don't remember kind of feeling overwhelmed by this. And speaking of, and you mentioned Tim Ferriss there, I read his 4-Hour Workweek book, years ago. And I think it was in that book where, and I'm not sure if this is where the selective ignorance and information diet you talked about. I think he did talk about going on an information diet. And even my memory was he was talking about just, stop reading newspapers, all that stuff, and just get your news just in conversations with other people. I found that interesting. And I don't know if I ever took it to that extreme, but what I have found just in my own experience of what helps me stay on priority is where I don't. I don't surf the internet. In other words, because I found it just it takes me off track from important but not urgent work, and so I really don't. I shouldn't say I don't read blogs at all, but hardly, and I do. I'm a Wall Street Journal subscriber, and so I kind of just skim that once a day. And so I guess that's kind of what I get as far as news. And in a perfect world, I'd not only skim that, but skim like the New York Times. In a perfect world, you want to kind of like get viewpoints, diverse viewpoints on different things. But for better or for worse, that's my as far as kind of outside information. And the other thing too is I mean, people learn in different ways, experientially and auditorily and visually and all that kind of stuff. For me personally, I'm a visual learner, and so I learn a lot by reading, and so books are oftentimes a great way for me to learn. And if someone has taken the time and energy to have actually written a book, there's a higher chance that there's at least going to be at least one important idea in there that's worth even talking about, compared to skimming a bunch of blog posts. It would be my at least theory on it. And there was one other thing that I was going to say on this. Oh, yeah, you were talking about, is it Gary Vaynerchuk? Is that how you pronounce his name?
Gary Vaynerchuk, yeah.
Vaynerchuk, okay.
That's right.
And I think, did he write a book called Crush It? I think that's the one.
Yeah, that was his first book. Yeah, it's quite funny though, because he doesn't actually write them. I think he speaks, and then he has someone. So he dictates, and he has someone actually write it. Because he's kind of got a funny joke he says at the moment, which is that he's done whatever it is, 3 or 4 New York Times bestsellers, and he's never actually written a book or something to that effect.
Well, good for him. Because because it was, I believe it was, that book was somebody had recommended, it's a must read, and so I read it, and so back to your point as far as so in my experience in reading that book was, wow, this guy can actually do all that, like you just mentioned, wear a whole bunch of hats and still be the one, just burning the midnight oil, being the expert in, I think it was wine or whatever he was writing about. Correct, he was the expert in, and at the same time doing all the marketing and everything. So if he can do it and still be happy and have a reasonable quality of life, more power to him. I'm not that talented. So I have to actually prioritize and spend my time on the high leverage items, and otherwise I would be miserable. And so so and that's another thing about when you mentioned kind of reading contradictory things is, and maybe this is obvious, but as your I guess my mindset as I'm reading different things is, trying to, not, it's not the question which is always on my mind, but being certainly cognizant of, hey, some of the stuff that I'm going to be reading is true and some of it isn't. And, and trying to discern what is either true or what's going to work for me and not work for me. And so when I read Crush It, I thought, this is just not going to work for me. And I was okay with that. I need to pursue things in a different way than what was described in that book.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, no, there's so many things, so many little threads we could pull on what you just said. One of the things is, I know you're a big fan of GTD, and maybe that will come up during this. But I'm just curious, if you read a business book, in fact, it doesn't even have to be a business book, but when you pull ideas out of that you want to execute on, what's your system for that? Like, how do you not do that and feel somewhat overwhelmed, or stop yourself from being overwhelmed from an ideas in a book? Like, can you kind of walk us through that process?
Sure, that's a great question, and I probably have a better than average system on what you just asked, but I still don't have the final answer on it. And so I'll tell you what I theoretically do, and then what actually happens. Okay, so theoretically, what I would do. Well, actually, it's in today's world, it's wonderful because I read most of my books on my iPad Mini, has a Kindle reader on it, and it allows you to just highlight whatever you want to highlight, and then you can export all those highlighted notes. If you go, you can go to a URL, and it'll allow you to export all your notes and process them. And so my best practice then is, once I've read a book, is to go in, export all those notes, and then process the notes. And what does process the notes mean? It means do the GTD methodology on the notes, which is looking at all the different things which I've highlighted on there, and figuring out, well, is there anything to do with this particular idea other than just let it sit in these notes? Like, for example, it might, it might be like, oh yeah, one of my notes is this other book that I need to read, and so I might have to put that on the, order another book, on my action list for ordering another book. Or I also have a system which has kind of gotten overgrown now, but where I have a list of ideas which I want to be reminded of, things which I thought, oh, that's, profound enough for me to put on this list that I want to be reminded of. Because there's this idea which someone had mentioned before, which it was not originally his, but I thought it was interesting. It was, what is it? Something, man needs to be reminded more than he needs to be taught. And in my own case, I found that there's a lot of truth in that. And so, some of my book notes will go into a reminder list, and I've got, well, at this point, really sort of 3 versions of those reminder lists. One, which is I get reminded of more often, is sort of like the more important things I want to be reminded of more frequently, and then sort of a medium list, which is less frequent, and then a once every 2 years reminder list, because I can only get reminded of so many ideas on any given day. So like, for example, on that list, which I get reminded of an idea once every 2 years, I think it's about 150 pages in a Word document right now, and I get to one page every, let's say, 3rd day or so after it's all said and done. So it takes me, a couple of years to kind of get through the whole thing. But but other times it could even be to build systems in place. So I'll give you a real life example. So there, you mentioned the book, The One Thing by Gary Keller. Was that the author?
Yeah.
So I remember reading that and thinking, oh my God, this is one I have to take seriously. And I actually process my notes right after I'm done here. And so I prioritized that and did the time for it. And a bunch of so in other words, there was a number of different ideas I took out of those notes, out of that book, and put them into my more frequent reminder list. And trying to think if there was, so for that one, that's probably where that one happened. There was what I did with the ideas. Another one which comes to mind is there was a book by Cal Newport called Deep Work. I'm not sure if you've heard of that.
Another great book. Yeah, I read that one.
That was another one. After I read it, it's like, oh my God, I've got to really take this stuff seriously and do it. And so, after I was done, I exported the notes shortly thereafterwards and went through, every single note that I had taken, and what am I going to do? And so that one, I remember making a mind map of all the different things, because I had to figure out what I was going to do related to, to email and different things. And that even grew a little bit beyond, because I actually speaking of blog posts, I happened to stumble upon a couple of blog posts which we made were actually the inspiration of me actually going the email direction which I went down. Was not his book, but actually his couple of blog posts on just doing a very unusual method of dealing with email. And in theory, what I would do is, after I've read a book, take the notes and process them, and basically go through and ask the GTD questions, like, is this actionable or is it reference? And if it's actionable, what's the next action? And do I just let it sit here on the list or whatever? Mm-hmm. And so that would be my best practice. Now in the actual world, I wind up reading a lot more books than I actually take the time to process. And that's the thing that I'd like to, and I have been trying to figure out for a while now, is to get the time to go back and process. Because there's a number of different books that I've read which are really important, but they weren't so glaringly importantly obvious that to make me say, oh my God, as soon as I'm done with this, I've got to spend, realistically, a couple or several hours processing my ideas and notes that came out of this book. And if I don't do that process, then I don't get as much value out of the book. So I'm still trying to improve that system, but that's where I'm at.
I think that's a great idea to have. So, for those that don't know what we're talking about GTD, I'm not going to go into the whole system right now. So I encourage you to check out David Allen's book, Getting Things Done. You can learn about that system. But I like the idea of pulling all your highlights, just, as you said, very easy to do if you're doing it on Kindle, into your in tray, and then looking at them and running them through that process. I don't actually do that. I think that's a great idea. I tend to just, I'll actually actively make a note in my in tray about something I've read there and then, and that's kind of how I do it.
That's pretty good too.
Yeah, I actually I have a really cool system which you might like actually for notes. Mm-hmm. I use some software called Readwise.io. Okay. And if you've heard of it, basically it links up with Kindle, and you make your notes on the Kindle on the book, and then Readwise will actually send you, or basically take all of your highlights and send you a digest at a frequency you desire. So if you want it daily or weekly or bi-weekly or monthly, it will send you a digest at that frequency. And what I do is I have it at the moment, I think it's either twice a week or weekly. And I use those, I get that email and I use those highlights for my weekly email for the membership. So for members of the Hit Business membership, they get a weekly email of the latest content. And I put in one of my favorite quotes, which I've taken from the Readwise highlights, and I put it in an email. It's just a nice little touch. I love quotes myself. Like you, I need to be reminded of some of these solid principles. I find it so beneficial. And so that's just something I started doing, and it's just a habit, and it's part of the process now. And it's just and every now and again, someone will talk about the quote or mention, that quote you did. And I thought, people, it seems to be resonating. So there you go. That's how I do it.
I'm gonna check that out, and I'll see. I'm gonna check it out. I'll see how it's set up and see if it might work for me. That it might turn into gold for me. We'll see.
I think that tool might work quite nicely for you. And I'm sorry, I'm filling up your intro as we speak. So just to shift gears, I do want to dig into productivity a bit more. But before we get there, I just want to ask you about going back to, I guess, the business context in terms of high intensity training and machines. I'm, curious how you would think about, again, if you had to start over, what you would look at in terms of your exercise equipment toolkit. So I don't know, maybe you can speak about this from the perspective of how you at the Perfect Workout decide on the machine footprint that you have at your various studios and the logic behind that. Maybe start there, and we can best discuss on, how you think about, a startup exercise toolkit.
Sure, that's a great question. Yeah, so I'll kind of, I think what will be useful is for me to just talk about how we got started the way that we did as far as our exercise machine selection and kind of my current thinking now. And so it's kind of funny when, well, first of all, I've historically a big fan of Nautilus machines. Arthur Jones, the sort of, founder at least of the, high intensity, the theory of high intensity training, is obviously the founder of Nautilus, and just the history and tradition in that sense. I've always just had an emotional attachment to Nautilus. Having said that, a lot of people, I'm in the high intensity world. I'm in sort of the super slow niche, I guess, of the high intensity world. And at least in the super slow niche, Medix machines are pretty popular. And as I hear myself say that out loud, they're pretty popular just in high intensity in general. So it was in, it would have been, I think it was the 1999 IHRSA conference. So IHRSA, IHRSA, it's one of if not the biggest health and fitness trade shows that happen out here in the States, and all the different, I shouldn't say all, many of the different major equipment manufacturers come and display what they've got, and different people, and it's often here in San Diego where I live. And in 1999, it happened to be there, and they take up the whole convention center down here, and I went there, and this was right before we actually opened in May of 99. And at the time, Nautilus had a leasing plan for their equipment, which was a 7-year leasing structure, whereas Medix and other equipment, it was 3 years. So long story short is the monthly payments were lower to go with Nautilus. And so that was actually a significant, back then, where I was in my life, that was a significant factor. And so was actually, I don't know if I would say the deciding factor, but definitely a big deciding factor, maybe even the deciding factor. Because I thought the Nautilus machines were great, and Medix is great too, but it's just, that's how we got started. And we, to this day, the lion's share of the equipment in our studios is Nautilus. And it's great equipment, but it's kind of fun as you look back and like, well, gosh, it all, was largely influenced from that particular thing versus, say, trying to, just be outfitted fully with Medix, let's say. And so, and then so over the years, as we started to scale, we kind of found which machines clients really wanted and which we thought were actually really effective. And those aren't always the same. There's not 100% correlation there between those two things. Yeah. But we wound up getting what we and we've been on pause for opening new studios for 2 or 3 years now, but essentially that might not be quite true, but essentially on pause for the last 2 or 3 years on opening new studios. But when we do and when we have, what we have 9 Nautilus machines that we usually start a new studio with, and I will see if I can remember them off.
I'd love to hear the details.
Yeah. So and these are all Nautilus, and so we do, and I think what Nautilus, at least the most recent version when we've been buying in the past, they had some variations of what was originally Nautilus Nitro as far as the line, and I think the most recent line I'm familiar with, I think, is called the Evo, and it's similar to the Nitro line, but they've got a different weight stack on there. And anyway, so we do the lat pull down, chest press, and then I think they call it the mid row, which we internally we usually call it the compound row. Let's see, we do a preacher curl, tricep extension. It's an overhead tricep extension in that particular line that we like to use. Abdominal machine, and leg press, a combo leg curl, leg extension, which might be on their Nova line, I think. And then we do an adduction abduction combo machine, which I think, well, that one actually I can't remember if that's on the Nova or the Evo line. And so I think that's 9 if I'm counting out on my fingers right now. So those would be the ones. If I might be missing one if I miscounted, but that's what we've started new studios with.
Wow.
So that's what we do. And then there's also other certainly great choices out there, including ARX, and we're actually at the moment have recently started a sort of a test studio with ARX equipment in it, and there's there's a lot to be said about ARX machines as far as their effectiveness and everything else. So we're working to see if it'll work well for our business.
Cool.
As well. So
wow.
Yeah.
So you're sort of testing that as like a pilot to see if it will work as a business, and then I guess if it's successful, then you may decide to scale that out in the future. Is that kind
That's
of
certainly a possibility. Yeah. And we're kind of relatively early on in the test right now, but we're excited about doing the test, and we'll see how we'll see how it goes. Yeah, and so it'll probably be. It could completely transform our business, or it could be, say we're just going to stop after the test, or somewhere in between. So,
do you know if the guys are going to be at Rec this year? I don't know if I haven't spoken to them, so I have no idea.
That's a good question. I
hope they are.
I don't know. I would imagine they would be, but I hope so.
Yeah.
They're a lot of fun.
Yeah, and I'd like to get another go at the machine if they bring one.
Exactly, and the machines are great to work out on too. So yeah.
This episode is brought to you by our sponsor, ARX. Are you looking to create a cutting-edge, high-intensity training facility? Are you confused on what equipment to use or how to separate yourself from the masses? Well, then ARX Fit might be the answer you're looking for. I asked Mike Polano from ARX a few questions about how ARX machines are challenging the status quo of the exercise industry around the globe. Mike, if you could, give the listeners a quick summary of why ARX is so different from the traditional machines or tools they're used to seeing in most exercise facilities.
ARX is totally different than anything you've seen before. This isn't just another weight stack machine. We've looked at the last 40 years of exercise technology and used that knowledge to create something entirely new. ARX uses a new form of resistance, a motor, and we pair that motor with computer software so that we can maximize the safety, effectiveness, and efficiency of your workouts. So you may be asking, okay, but how does ARX compare to weights? Traditional machines you see in gyms today are based on lifting metal weights and battling gravity. What people don't realize is that when you're forced to lift a static weight like this, one that doesn't adapt or change while you use it, you're underloading yourself rep after rep. And this unnecessarily limits your ability to make improvements. With ARX, we've taken a totally different approach. We removed weights and gravity from the equation altogether. Instead, ARX combines our patented motorized resistance with our custom computer software to provide you with the world's safest, most effective, and most quantified form of resistance training ever. When you train with ARX, you are training to your perfect level of resistance, both positively and negatively 100% of the time. No more guessing what weight to use. ARX does all of that for you, instantly and automatically. We'll also track and measure every second of every rep, so you can quantify all of your workouts to find out if you're improving and by exactly how much. Whether your goals are bigger muscles, increased strength, stronger bones, or just to look good in a bathing suit, ARX can help you achieve all of these and more, but do so in a fraction of the time it would take compared to traditional equipment. If you're looking for the most efficient, most effective, and most quantified piece of exercise equipment on the market today, then look no further than ARX.
Thanks, Mike. That all sounds really impressive. If you'd like to learn more about ARX, visit arxfit.com and mention that you heard about ARX on the High Intensity Business podcast to receive an exclusive deal of $500 off shipping and installation of your ARX machines.
So this might be a good way of expanding this discussion. So I'll tell you what we're doing, and I'd love to hear your point of view. And I want you to be completely honest if you think it's some bad choices. So we've acquired a obviously on the secondary market a MedX, I guess, Big Six. So the Big Five, and then the lumbar extension machine. And that's through Craig Huber, who's was a rec and obviously a guest on the show a while back, a good friend of mine. And there's also a hammer plate loaded leg extension. We will also get, just to expand the options and probably allow for free weights, body weight training, we'll have power block dumbbells that will scale up to something like 90 pounds to obviously cater for the stronger folk out there. And thanks to Luke and Heather for helping me identify the right dumbbells. And they're really expensive, those power block dumbbells. And then we'll probably get some sort of functional trainer for cable work. Maybe that will have a chin-up bar in too for chins and dips and things. And then probably just some kind of, adjustable bench, and then a mat area really for training, on the bench. Obviously, if they're doing like a shoulder press or bench press with dumbbells on an adjustable bench, you'll need obviously a matted area to absorb that the dumbbells come crashing down on the floor if that ever were to happen. So that's kind of, and maybe some resistance bands as well, and then that allows us to do things like manual resistance training too. So that's our very basic setup, and then our view is that as we start, we generate cash flow, we then acquire more pieces over time to provide obviously a richer experience to clients and help differentiate the business. Things like a gluteator, I think is a useful tool, and various other machines. And then there's also just a selfish desire to obviously get these machines in, because they really don't exist in Ireland. You can probably get some Nautilus, but that's about it in some places. So it's they're toys as much for us. Although we're trying to look at this through a business lens. Right. So I'm just curious, what do you make of that as an initial setup? Any holes, things that you would do differently?
I think it sounds great. I just, to your point about kind of wanting your own toys, I can remember back when I started back in 1999, I actually started with 6 Nautilus machines, and one of them was the pullover. And it wasn't, and I had trained clients in commercial gyms before, including on the pullover. And I knew that the pullover is probably not the best choice for a typical client with the form discrepancy, that kind of stuff, to where the pullover was going to be, let's say, a better choice for a typical client than, say, a lat pull down. But it would be certainly more than adequate, for a typical client. And I just wanted it, for myself, so I can totally understand as far as kind of wanting to have, toys which are fun for you to use. And because you want to enjoy the business also with, enjoy with quotes around it, because high intensity training is so difficult. But I think, with the Big Five plus that hammer leg curl, I think you said, right there, you're covering, just about everything pretty well. And then with power block dumbbells to go up, I think you said to 90 pounds, then all the other things that you're mentioning then really just allow you to get any miscellaneous things covered
That's
pretty
right.
well. The functional trainer with the cables and everything. So I think you're doing, I think that sounds great from my perspective.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Because I'm thinking, there might be people out there who, for instance, struggle with a medic's overhead press. Maybe they've got shoulder issues, and so you need to be able to obviously work around those things. I'm just curious though, with your business, do you literally strictly just use those machines that line you went through earlier, or do you do manual resistance or more basic free weight stuff? Just curious your kind of process around that kind of stuff.
Yeah, that's a great question. So a couple things is, one off the top of my head is, we, leave it up to the best judgment of the trainer as far as what's going to work for a particular client. And so so for example, just to use one example, so I mentioned a preacher curl is one of our kind of standard 9 exercise machines that we use. A trainer might feel that, for whatever reason, that they want to do dumbbell curls, like with a client instead of the preacher curl. And it could even be just something like just to have a little bit of variety in there, which might not be important physically, but the older that I've gotten, the more clients I've been exposed to, we're not just physical beings, we're also psychological beings as well. And so staying interested in the training is important, and so we leave a lot up to the judgment of the trainer as far as what's going to work best. And so we do in practice, the lion's share of the training would be on our Nautilus machines, which, by the way, at some of our studios, we have more machines than the ones which I just mentioned, and they tend to usually be the ones which have been busier. We just need more. Just need to have more machines to take more clients through. And so sometimes we'll have 2 leg presses or, 280 abduction combo machines or, or in some of the places we'll have, pullover and some of the kind of, or even a lateral raise, where just have extra machines for extra variety for, the really busy studios that, kind of it just helps to have that at. And so, but having said that, we'll not just use them. Different, trainers won't necessarily always use the machines. They'll sometimes use body weight exercises or dumbbells, quote free weights, and yeah. Trying to think if there's anything else that I had to say on that. As long as we're sticking by the principles of, making, challenging the muscles, fatiguing them, inroading them. And ideally, having it be progressive in either time or load, then kind of really just the principles of high intensity training apply to a Nautilus machine just like they do to a barbell. So, yeah.
Okay. For some reason in my head, I just thought you would strictly use machines. I didn't realize you were using other modalities as well. And I don't know why. I just thought it'd be as the simplest possible is what I was thinking, the way you guys would approach it.
Yeah. Well, and ideally we would approach it as simply as possible. But there's clients come in all shapes and forms, including having different injuries, and so we do have dumbbells at our studios, and again, body weight work sometimes is appropriate depending on a particular client's injuries, and or even just for variety, like I was mentioning. So for me personally, I definitely tend lean towards, say, if you have a well-designed machine, that's the one that I would use for myself and for clients, the vast majority of the times. But even if it's been a number of years since I've been, in the studios training clients myself every day. But if I had to do it over again, I'd probably do more variety with them than I did, like variety as far as not using the same machines in the same order every time than I did when I was actually taking people through. Cause it just, most people would get bored sooner than I would with that. So there's something to be said for variety.
Awesome. So I'm really keen to move on to some productivity questions. That's okay, Matt. Some things I'm just really fascinated about regarding how you manage your own time and things like that. So I guess carrying on from where we got to last time with this, I'm just curious, how do you, as obviously, founder, president of The Perfect Workout, how do you structure your day?
Yeah, that's a good question. Okay. So, and you're just going to, it sounds like you wanted to leave that question kind of open-ended. Is that right?
Yeah,
Okay.
I have a bad habit of talking and making questions too long. And so I try to keep it succinct.
Sure. Okay. So okay, so I'll start with the week, a typical week, Sunday through Saturday is, so for me, a typical week is working on the business Monday through Friday, and Saturdays are typically where I'm responsible for watching the kids, and my wife has hopefully some time, for rest and doing whatever she wants, and then Sundays are my day where I'm not watching the kids or doing business, and just whatever's whatever I want to do on Sunday. So that would be a typical week. So if we're looking at kind of just productivity, I'd be looking at Monday and Friday, the way things are structured currently, and so what I do is try as much as I can, and I certainly don't always am not able to get this, but I try, and because I try, then I do better than I would if I didn't try. Is I try to have all of my meetings at noon or later, and the reason for that is from some of the books that I've read, including the one thing that you mentioned from Gary Keller, and they talk about again 80-20 high priority, important but not urgent from the 7 Habits, Stephen Covey's book. Basically, what I want to do is when my mental willpower is at the best it's going to be for the day, which is going to be the first part of the day. I want to be able to work on the most important stuff, whether you call that the one thing or the 20% that matters, the high leverage items or the high ROI or whatever it is. And for me, and because we all have different strengths and weaknesses on kind of what we bring to building the business. And so, like, for example, some people are, really, charismatic, like some people running businesses or like leading a business are really charismatic leaders, and they're, the way that they kind of influence the growth of business might be by, influencing people in a charismatic way. And me being, I call myself a recovering engineer, in other words, my degree's in engineering, and my personality style is a stereotypical engineer. And I've becoming a personal trainer actually, forced me to gain some, conversation skills. And it's that, but my sort of natural sweet spot is not being some rah, kind of really charismatic, really influential, persuasive person in that sense, just from sort of the strength of my personality. But I feel like I have probably above average ability to digest information and sort the important from the not important, and make decisions and figure out what to do. And so the way that I feel like I kind of some of the significant value that I bring to, making our business run and growing, and attempting to grow it is the deep work, like uninterrupted solo, deep concentration work on high value things to move the business forward. And so sometimes that can be going through a particular decision-making process that I'd like to do about something, or mind mapping, or it could even be reading something that's really important, or a number of other things. Like it could be writing something that needs to be written. And so I have found, for me, and I'm not saying everybody's this way, because there is, a difference as far as when people are sort of at their mental peak as far as their willpower. But probably, I would guess over half people, especially as you get older, would fall into, Gary Keller's recommendation. One thing as far as making the first half of, what does he say? The first half of your day, have it be a maker, and the second half of your day be a manager.
Yeah, and Paul Graham expanded on that. He's the founder of Y Combinator. He wrote a famous essay called "The Maker Manager Schedule," talking about how coders don't like to be interrupted by meetings, and how using the whole. Sorry to interrupt, but it's the whole in the morning where your willpower is highest, it's where you're most productive. That's where you do high impact, high level work, and then admin and meetings in the afternoon. So sorry, I'll let you continue.
No, that's great. I'm writing that down here. So another place to look for more info. Because I'd say one thing which really kind of always is kind of a shiny object for me is if there's something that I think might make me a little more productive, it's something that I really tend to gravitate towards wanting to learn about.
Yeah.
But and so that's what I do is do as much as I can with keeping the mornings free for important but not urgent deep work. And it doesn't always work out that way. In fact, even today, as we're sitting here, it's a Tuesday, and I've got meetings scheduled the entire day from 8 a.m., which was earlier than you and I started, until after 5 p.m. And I've got 1 hour in the middle there, which I'll squeeze in some in-basket processing and hopefully some food, but that's it. So it doesn't work out every single day that way, but as much as I can. And let me look at my calendar. I would say maybe I'd like to say that probably about half the days I'm able to at least get the majority of my mornings to where it's where I have the opportunity to work on important but not urgent things without other meetings.
Let me interject for a moment and
Sure.
let me play devil's advocate for a minute here. So, you've like me, you've probably read all the books that talk about the value, the one thing being, I guess, the main one, the value of time blocking that morning to focus on high impact work.
Right.
The deep work talks about that, essentialism, 4-hour work week, et cetera, et cetera. Now, if that's so important, wouldn't you always protect that every day? Because it sounds like, from what you said, about today, you've got me. I'm obviously very fortunate that I get the chance to speak to you. So I'm kind of shooting myself in the foot here. But surely, knowing how much more productive you would be, you would just protect that, right? So you would protect 8 till 12, whatever it is, or maybe a 2 or 3 hour block. You would just have a recurring, like, you can't book meetings in this space. Why don't you? What's the reason for not doing that?
That's a great question. And also part of answering your question is there is a recurring block from, I think it's 8 to 12:30 on my schedule, 8 to 12 or 12:30. It says blocked for deep concentration work. And so the people who have access to my schedule are myself and my assistant. And so it's either her or me who would kind of break that. And we have certain rules for when it can be broken, and basically can be broken based on a judgment call. But when I'm kind of having her
what are her rules?
Well, her rules are kind of we have certain classes of types of meetings, like as far as which, like, A type meetings can be booked in a certain time frame, and B can be in another, and C can fall in another place, and so. Those were put in place several years ago, and they need to be updated. But that's so I tell her, hey, can you please schedule this? And it's a B priority meeting, 30 minutes or whatever it is, and so that's how we go. And so B priority is she's allowed to break that block. So in other words, but C priority, no, it has to fit in the other times which are available, after in the afternoon.
Because sorry, Matt, if I may just say quickly, I guess it makes sense. Like, if, for instance, you have a meeting with a realtor or a lawyer or something that's a really important meeting where a decision has to happen that's going to be a material impact on your business, then that strikes me as an A-level event, in which case could fall into that block. Am I right? Is that how these things end up happening? How you end up losing that? Is that how it goes?
Yeah, that would be one example. The other, like even just from today, an example, actually actually 3 examples. You're even one example where at the Pacific time I started with you at 11. And so if we go through these on my schedule today, just real quickly, is the first call that started at 8 is actually with a super high level financial consultant that we had the opportunity to start working with a couple of years ago. But he lives in South Africa, and so we and it's Kyle and me on the phone with him once a month, and it's got to be 8 a.m. Pacific time because it's like 6 o'clock his time. Anyway, that's just when it works,
Right.
And so then right after him, it was a call with another consultant we work with. It was actually here in Pacific time, but long story short, it's I try to think the right way of putting it. It's after making the judgment call in his case with his availability and the potential value to our business, I'm okay if and when needed to break that particular 8 to 12 window in his case. And in your case, the at 11 o'clock, because you're also overseas, and trying to think of the right way of putting it. Even though I'd say probably me being on the podcast might not, be hugely valuable for me. Like I'm not trying to sell anything, to your general audience, or I mean, we might get some clients here or there, but it's
it'll help the page rank of the perfect workout.
Well, I've gotten so much value of listening to a number of the podcasts, so I feel kind of an obligation to like, if you want to talk with me, I'm like, okay, I've got to figure out a way to make this work, because I feel obligated to help, provide value for you since you provided value for me.
Well, so that's very nice for you to say so.
Yeah, and when you're overseas, like if you happen to be on Pacific time, maybe we would try to figure out a different time than 11 a.m. But anyway, that's how it happens. And like I said, or even tomorrow, I'm going to be heading up to our LA regional meeting, and so gonna be driving. It's just so that in the morning it's not going to work to have my sort of perfect window. But if I look at this week, it's really just ugly in my mornings for a number of reasons. And as I look at next week, 3 out of the 5 days are pristine. So as far as the morning goes, and so I've just doing the best that I can, making a judgment call on that. So I'm not like, totally, obviously I'm not totally black and white about that. I just have to make the judgment as far as recognizing that the time when your willpower is the highest to work on the highest value items is precious. Absolutely. And make the judgment call when it makes sense to say, well, I'm going to have to give some of that away. So, and for me personally, my personality style is default personality style is to be naturally introverted. And so for me, talk with people actually kind of definitely pulls my willpower down. Whereas apparently for some people that are extroverted, maybe it might actually kind of energize them, but not for me. And so if I have a meeting with somebody else starting at 8 a.m., it is very like, even if it's just a 1 hour meeting and I have a block of just open time after that, it's unlikely that I'm going to really get to something which is going to take a lot of mental horsepower or proactive mental horsepower to kick into gear to get something really major. So it's important, but that's where I've gotten to so far in my journey as far as what I just described.
That's so interesting. I'm very similar to you. I think a lot of people think I'm quite extrovert, but I'm not. I feel exhausted spending time with people. I love it, for spending time with good people, interesting people, intelligent people. But it drains me. And like you, I love nothing more. Well, I'm not sure if you said exactly this, but I personally love nothing more than knowing, wow, I've got 3 hours where I can just sit in front of my laptop and I can just attack something really high impact on my business,
That's heaven, yeah.
Yeah, right. Knowing that I'm not going to be, interrupted. And I follow very similar approach to you. Obviously, I'm, much smaller business than you, so I don't have the same pressures and people trying to sort of secure my time as much as you do. But it's so interesting listening to you, because I think before I had this conversation with you, Matt, and this sort of started to appear more obvious to me as we were talking last time, is that you are only human, and you don't and you don't have your systems necessarily perfected, and a lot of them you're always refining, and you're a work in progress. And even I as I mentioned stuff during this call, you've said, "Oh, I look into that," and it's a compliment to me. I'm thinking, "Wow, Matt's going to read that thing that I just said," which surely he's far too busy for that. So it's really nice to hear that, because I think sometimes people who aren't aware of this about you might think, "Oh, Matt's just such an incredible entrepreneur. He never makes mistakes, and he manages his time perfectly." And so it's very helpful, is what I'm trying to say, for people to hear you talk about the details of this stuff, because I think everyone can take a breath and realize, what, you're not going to have it perfect every day. You're going to get your day completely sabotaged by people and events and things that you can't predict, and that's life, So I appreciate that. I wanted to ask you about social media. You mentioned deep work earlier. This is ironic and quite meta, but I've got an item on my in tray to get off Facebook. I may stay on Facebook in terms of a business presence, but I'm likely to remove my personal profile because I just think the negatives outweigh the positives, and it's more of a a need to want to be more productive and happier. I think would be those things would be improved if I were to come off Facebook. So that's on the list. So sorry guys, I know if you're listening to this and you enjoy interacting with me on Facebook, you'll have to interact with me through other channels that I make available. So are you on any social media at all or not?
Essentially, no. I actually do have a Facebook account that I don't actually that I use an alias for, but I use it just so I can see how Facebook works. In other words, see how it looks to a user. And so I asked a couple of my friends, "Hey, do you mind if you friend me?" And then I can kind of see how this all looks. But no, it's on an alias. You wouldn't be able to find me searching me on there. And so essentially, no. And I never got started with social media, and so I feel kind of fortunate about that. And I really don't have desire to. Yeah. So I guess that's the short answer to your question. Yeah.
And one final question, because I know you need to shoot off for a call, but you mentioned to me that you don't use text messaging, and I want to know how you get away with that. How does your wife let you get away with that? How does that work?
That's a great question, and yeah, it has been a bit of a source of friction between my wife and myself. But actually, texting is kind of texting is to me the thing which it's sort of the worst of everything. And so it's. But having said that, most people text, and whenever I kind of talk about what I view as the negatives of texting, it doesn't seem to. I don't know if I've ever kind of talked with anybody that kind of felt like, oh yeah, man, I've got to go do your part. And first of all, I should say I definitely do recognize there are certainly some texting does provide extra value in some ways beyond other methods of communication, like speed and ease in certain contexts of delivering communications back and forth. So I do recognize that. Having said that, what I don't think people or very many people realize is that there actually are some significant downsides to texting, and some which detract from a person's life. And in my personal opinion, those downsides, at least for my current life right now, and this might change as my kids get older, and if they want to text, I love my kids to death, and so I'll cross that bridge when I come to it as far as figuring what to do. But at least for my current life and my life up until now, the downsides, in my opinion, were clearly, the downsides outweighed the what I consider the small positives that texting provides. And so one thing about me and texting is I never got started on social media, and so I fortunately never got started with texting. So nobody ever sort of expected me to text, as far as it wasn't like I had all these relationships that were built on texting and all that kind of stuff. And so I just never got started on it. And so that was helpful. Whereas email was tougher because I was, had been, and even am still, at least have a weird version of interacting through email, I guess would be the right way of putting it. And, or I shouldn't say weird, unusual for the times. And to me, texting is it's if you go back, we're in 2020 right now. If you go back 15 to 20 years before texting was ubiquitous in our culture, and emailing was sort of the way that people would kind of tend to communicate for a lot of stuff that people now text through. The time efficiency experts back then would talk about turn off that little ding in your email, system, which dings when you have a new email in there, because it's going to distract you, and you're going to get thrown off course, and it's going to. I think that the numbers are allegedly 23 minutes if you get, on average, if you get distracted with something before you get back on task on whatever the thing that you're trying to work on before. And so when texting started to get more and more popular, I started looking at, gosh, this is like email, except for it's the worst parts of email. It was just much more, immediate and distracting. And I'm not sure so much anymore. People don't have their phones kind of dinging and that kind of stuff, although I'll occasionally hear it. But I do see people's phones light up. And even when my wife's phone lights up in the room for her, and it's not even a text for me, it sort of distracts me, like, oh, I wonder who that is. And so to me, texting is just, it like I said, the cons outweigh the pros significantly. And in fact, if it wasn't so pervasive in society, and the only reason to even consider it is because everybody else does it, and so it makes it easier to interact with people in some ways, and so it makes my life a little more in that respect. I don't always have the same speed or immediacy, or some people might even be turned off to even want to communicate with me because I don't communicate that way. But I'm at this point in my life, I'm willing to take that.
I really admire it. I agree with you. I think I've come to the point where I've just had obviously a newborn baby. I'm the business is going great, and I'm really passionate about it and focused on it. And then obviously we're opening the studio and trying to carve somewhat of a social life and relationship out of all of this. And it's become really apparent to me just, how you have to really protect your time. And I've been a productivity nut for a while, but it's more recently become really apparent to me. You're absolutely right. WhatsApp and Facebook Message have become the new email in a way. Right now I must have 10 unread WhatsApp conversations and probably 5 unread Facebook message conversations, maybe 10 Facebook message, which is your worst nightmare, right? And I don't have any notifications. I learned that a long time ago and switched all of those off. And I tend to have my phone in airplane mode most of the day. So long as I'm with my son and my fiance, I really just have the phone. I don't really care. I just have the phone off or on airplane mode. There's no one, like, it's when I'm not with them where I'm a little bit, I want to be available for emergencies and things like that, which might be, I don't know, a bit irrational perhaps. But that's just maybe my own thing. So want to start sort of wrapping this one up, Matt, but there's something you said, and I just think this would be a good question to end on. You have a lot of unusual habits, as you've pointed out, which I think are really, valuable. And whilst I don't think people should necessarily try and be Matt Hedman, I do think there are things that they can take from your own approach, sort of productivity hacks, techniques, principles, and implement in their own lives. And I, would recommend the listeners listen to part 1 because they'll learn all about your email policy, which is fascinating. But what is there that we haven't mentioned? And I don't expect you to necessarily remember everything we discussed in part 1, but anything that's really unusual from a productivity point of view that you notice in yourself that you think, I'm probably the only person I know who does this, or there's very few people that do X, but it's hugely impactful in terms of your own productivity and sense of joy. Is there anything that comes to mind that you think would be quite valuable for people to and unusual?
As far as productivity is concerned?
Correct, yeah.
Okay.
Maybe something efficiency based or something like that,
I'm just kind of looking at some notes here right now, and seeing if we, because we talked about 80-20 and that type of stuff, and we talked about important
like even if it's like that you eat the same meals every day, or you wear the same outfit like Steve Jobs, or something like that. I would be curious if there's something that you think, that thing I do actually is a huge time saver that you haven't mentioned. If there's anything at all.
Yeah, that's okay. Because it sounds like
the
you're
weirder the better.
Sort of like me. Well, so it sounds like you're sort of like me in that, gosh, if I can find any extra idea which helps my productivity, I would just think it's gold. And so what I'm about ready to say probably is going to be disappointing from that perspective, but at least I have some answer for what you're going to say here. And so it's actually related to fitting in reading into a pretty busy lifestyle, which I've got, we have 275 or 300 employees or so in our company, and as we speak, 63 locations, and got my wife and a marriage to do the best I can to that's important to me, to make that work well, and also the 2 young kids obviously are important, and so all these things take different time and energy, and so it's not necessarily easy to quote find the time to for reading and learning and expanding my knowledge base and getting exposed to different ideas. And so for me personally, what I've found is to do there's 2 slots which work best for me. It's first thing in the morning, right upon waking, before, and I don't always get to it because there's sometimes urgencies and quote fires
Sure.
that happen. But I found that if I do, within reason, do the best I can to get some reading done first thing in the morning, and then last thing at night, like with the after all the lights are off and I got my iPad on the lowest brightness and also the orange, orange setting and my orange glasses on and
Yes.
and the light all the way down to as low as it can possibly go.
I'm the
so it's
same.
not going to keep me awake. Then those are the 2 times which I find I'm able to get that super important learning in and not have it squeezed out more than it already is. Like I said, I would love to get even more in, but that's the best which I've come up with so far. So yeah, if I wish my wife was here to kind of answer questions as far as what is the weird kind of like 1 or 2 things that I haven't mentioned already, because she could probably come up with a list. Because I am a little unusual in a lot of different ways, and they're not all good. And so she might have some. She might be able to give you an earful. I'm not sure, but nothing else is coming to mind off the top of my head.
Well, maybe one day we can have your wife participate with you, and she can reveal all the secrets. That'd be a lot of fun. Who knows? Maybe we'll get the chance to do that one day. Matt, thank you so much for taking time today. Best way for the listeners to find out more about you and your work. What is that?
So it would be our company's website, theperfectworkout.com. So theperfectworkout.com, all spelled out. And awesome. That's where we're at.
Cool. And I will just quickly mention, obviously we've talked about a lot of systems and time management related things. Dana, Wiltshire and Kyle, who are both work for the Perfect Workout, are part of the Hit Business membership, where they both contributed content on leadership and things like identifying core values and management systems. So, one of the things you guys do so well, which is really unique, is your ability to kind of have a distributed workforce and obviously manage the business a lot of it remotely. And they were really kind enough to share some of the how-tos on those things and within the Hit Business membership. So if you want access to that exclusive content, as well as a great and high-level HIC business community, monthly Q&As, and lots of resources and blueprints from the likes of the Perfect Workout, Discover Strength, etc., then please join the membership over at highintensitybusiness.com/membership. And to find the blog post for this episode and download a PDF transcript, which will be available either a PDF transcript or PDF resources, please go to highintensitybusiness.com and search for episode 257. And until next time, thank you very much for listening.
Discover how to achieve your health and fitness goals, become a great personal trainer, and build a successful high-intensity training business. Check out highintensitybusiness.com. highintensitybusiness.com.
This episode is brought to you by ARX, the most innovative, efficient, and effective all-in-one exercise machines I have ever seen. I was really impressed with my ARX workout. The intensity and adaptive resistance was unlike anything I've ever experienced. I love how the machine enables you to increase the negative load to fatigue target muscles more quickly, and I love how the workouts are effortlessly quantified. The software tracks maximum force output, rate of work, total amount of work done, and more in front of you on screen, allowing you to compete with your previous performance to give you and your clients real-time motivation. The ARX uses a computer-controlled motor to give you the exact amount of resistance your clients need 100% of the time. This means that the resistance can never become dangerous, is intuitive and simple to use, and can provide you with all of the results you and your clients are looking for in a fraction of the time. ARX is highly effective and efficient in delivering all of the benefits of exercise, including increased strength, muscle mass, cardiovascular conditioning, bone mineral density, and injury recovery. As well as being utilized by many high-intensity trainers to deliver highly effective and efficient workouts to their clients, ARX comes highly recommended by world-class trainers and brands, including Bulletproof, Tony Robbins, and Ben Greenfield Fitness. To find out more about ARX and get $500 off install when you place an order, please go to arxfit.com and mention HIB, that's high intensity business, in the How Did You Hear About Us field. So again, to get $500 off install when you place an order, head on over to arxfit.com and enter HIB in the How Did You Hear About Us field.